Good day, everyone. Scooter here, coming to you live from the Granville Guitars World Headquarters here in lovely St. Petersburg, Florida. Today on the bench, we have a very lovely, very clean Fender Bandmaster head, blackface era. We're going to figure out the date as we go along. I haven't yet looked at the date codes and such, although I have seen the inside of the amp, and it is completely original inside, very clean. Should be a treat to look at. Little background on the Bandmaster, real quick. I was introduced in '52 in the Tweed era with the TV front. It had a single 15. It had two 6L6s, which is something that survived unto this model. It also has two 6L6s for power. That first iteration of the amp was only 15 watts of output. It had two 6SJ7s, a 6SN7, and a 6SL7. So it had octal preamp tubes. That's how that design went early into 52. And then 52 through 54, it had a similar tube configuration and went to the wide panel. 54 through 60, it was a narrow panel tweed, and by that point it was using a 12A Y7 for the input tube, 12A X7, two 6L6s, and it acquired a tube rectifier at that point. Now on into the Tolex era, it was first a brown Tolex from 60 to 61 with silicon rectifier. 5 7025s and two 6L6s. At that point, it acquired the tremolo or vibrato, as you can see it. Let's zoom in here. Vibrato channel, right there. Woohoo! So this is definitely 1960s. It was brown it was brown. You can find them in cream Tolex during that era, and then finally the black face, which is what we have here. This would have come with a single 12-inch speaker cabinet and 4 7025s, two 12AX7s, two 5881s, and a silicon rectifier circuit. Yeah, as you can see, it's nice and clean. It's just lovely. It's been well kept. It's got some bad rust in odd places, which is really strange. If you look here at the handle, for instance, you've got one cap that looks pretty good, and the other one that had seen a whole bunch of rust. I've actually cleaned that already. That was covered with rust dust, and I've cleaned it up as good as possible. But yeah, I had a lot of questions from people. I always talk about the Snowman Knobs. This has all original Snowman Knobs. And if we zoom in here, let's see if I can do this with the with my admittedly crappy tripod here. Yeah, there we go. If you look at the knobs carefully, you can see first of all that our set screw is located next to. I got to get around here. Hang on. Yeah, the set screw, if we zoom in there, the set screw is located. Oh, it's not going to focus now. Thank you very much. The set screw is located right there at the 10 position. It was later changed to the 1 position. And there's the Snowman. Very well defined lower portion of the 8 and upper portion of the 8. Looks like a little snowman. As time went on, those two little circles got more and more the same size, and at this particular point, the bottom part was much larger. So that's what a Snowman knob is, if you didn't know that. Normal channel with bright switch. Earlier iterations of this amp in the chocolate era and cream era had a presence control, which was done away with in favor of the bright switch at some point. And yeah, that's all for the front side of this jewel. Let's flip it around back, shall we? Okay, here we are around back. and you know, the usual Fender features in terms of layout and construction style, etc. We got a couple of Ruby 6L6s in here, which are not my favorites, but we're going to leave those in here because that's what the owner has. So for now, those are staying in place. Removed all of the no-volt tubes for the time being because I'm getting ready to take this chassis out of the cabinet, and those 6L6s will come out as well in an effort to not mess them up. But you can see just how clean this bad boy is. It's been well taken care of, obviously. I've seen reissues that don't come in this clean, but this guy is just very, very well kept. Anyway, we're going to have to do a cap job on this. I've already seen the cap pan. We got leakers in there, so that's going to get redone. And some screen grid resistors, as I recall. His plan for this is to play it, so as they should be. So we're going to look at making it very dependable and very toneful, as it were. So there's the back panel. Let's take it out of the cabinet. Okay, here's something that's really kind of cool. If you see here on the underside of the chassis, sometimes these amps will have this stuff and sometimes not. I'm not sure of the reason for that. You see that NA5264. I'm not personally acquainted with the significance of that particular number, but you notice if you look over here at the cabinet, that same stamp is in the cabinet. Where was that bad boy? There it is right there. Hopefully you can see it, NA3264. So obviously it was meant for this cabinet and this chassis to go together. Some kind of a control number from the factory, I'm assuming. I'm sure someone out there knows the answer because it is the internet after all. The other thing I wanted to point out is that the tube label is still here, which is a good thing. Let's see if it'll let me zoom in on there. Yeah, AA763. And the stamp number looks like a 13 from here. I didn't have an especially good angle. So that's the appropriate tube label for this cabinet and this amplifier. Excuse me. Starting over here with the power transformer. Let's see what we got for codes here. 606403. If it'll focus. Hopefully it will. One of these days I need to learn how to manually focus this silly thing. Now that I've made about 70 videos, it's probably time, huh? So that's going to be a 74. And that is the correct power transformer for this. There is your choke. 125C146064. Okay, and then over here we have 6064. 125A6A. That's also correct. That is your output transformer. So all transformers are correct and present. We're calling this thing a 64, which is really cool. This is the year I was born. So yeah, let's see. Let's have a look at these filter caps. All right, cap pan is open. You can see that these are the originals. You can see that some of the insulating strip on the inside of the cap can pulled off onto the caps themselves. You can see a little bit of a mushroom burst down here on the positive end of that first node totem pole. And so that means we're done. And these are original caps. They're 55 years old. So that's a dangerous thing, and we want to pull those out. I'm going to flip this around real quick and let you see the other side of these caps. All right, here we got the positive sides here, the other side. And yeah, you can see a couple of bursts there. There's one right here on the other positive end of the other totem pole, the main totem pole. There's one here. in this second node, and these guys should get replaced as well. I've heard a lot of different theories on, yeah, and then there's the 220Ks up inside there. There's two of them. There's one there, and there's one tucked in here too. Those are got to go away as well. I've heard a lot of theories about replacing these or not replacing them. I've seen too many amplifiers where those were left in place and they failed, and what that does is that shorts out two ends of two capacitors together, and typically those caps don't last in the wake of that. So I like to replace those, put some nice metal oxides in there that'll handle the abuse a little better. So that's what I like to do in those positions. Let's have a look at the inside, shall we? All right, as promised. Man, look at this thing. Look at this, will you? Everything is as it should be, as it once was when it left the factory in 1964. Down here, we're going to start down at this end of the board. This is your normal channel capacitor set, bass, mid, treble. This is the normal channel slope resistor, this 100K right here. These two are first channel preamp cathode resistors. Nope. Those are plate resistors. Sorry about that. And next to that, this is your coupling cap for the normal channel, and right here, this is the first. You'll if you've never seen these are kind of interesting. This is a single housing with two capacitors inside. On the other side of it, there's one connection that goes to this ground plate up here. And the other side of it, there are two positives, because there's actually two capacitors inside this one housing. You can replace this with, F&T actually makes one like this. It's a little bit larger, and they're quite expensive. But usually what we do is, this is a 25 microfarad at 25 volts, two of them in the same housing. And typically we'll replace that with two separate 25 at 25 capacitors right there. And the job that thing is doing, that's cathode resistor and capacitor. The resistor's tucked under there. This is your bypass for the cathodes on that first preamp tube. And then we repeat basically the same stuff from here down for the vibrato or tremolo channel. You've got your bass, mid, treble caps, etc., and then more bypass, cathode, plate resistors and such. And then you get right here. And this is actually, whoops, I got to move the camera so you can see where I'm pointing. Here's where the vibrato channel tone stack is repeated. Once we get down to here, this is actually, how would I describe this? It's a capacitor network, really, for the tremolo channel, and this is what defines the actual oscillation of the tremolo. This is your little optocoupler bug, which comprises an LDR, a light-dependent resistor, and a photocell together in one package that's been shrink-wrapped together. And that has to do with the tremolo as well. So once you get past all of that, you get into your phase inverter coupling caps, and the phase inverter itself is a long-tailed pair. Down here at the end, you have your output coupling caps, and your phase inverter plate resistors are down here, etc. All of this is normal black face specs. So most of that, I'm going to leave everything in place as much as possible, unless something is just not behaving itself. If there's a noise or a performance issue of some sort, I'm going to endeavor to leave as much of this in place as possible. These caps will be going away. All of these old Mallorys, they're 55 years old. I've seen it where the little ones can work okay, but they've invariably become leaky at this point. There's really no doubt about that. So there is your bias supply trim pot right there. Let's see what the date is. 13764 20th week. So again, 1964. You've got some stack pole potentiometers up right there at the end of the channel where the tremolo is controlled. A lot of stack poles. All of them are. No CTS pots in this bad boy, except for the bias pot. That's a CTS. Then you have your rectifier diodes right up there. And they look kind of funky, don't they? I don't think I've ever seen them do that. It has some corrosion on one end. Sorry, I mucked up my camera angle. So that's very curious. I may end up redoing those just for safety's sake. You know, because like I said, he's going to hammer on this amp. He's going to use it. It might even be used for keyboards. He hasn't really decided yet, but it's going to get used. Let me reset here, and we're going to look at the screen grid resistors. All right, these guys right here. That is your screen grid resistor, 470 ohms. Whether I replace these or not depends largely on what the intended use and attitude is of the owner as to what the amp is going to do and what he's going to use it for. This is going to get used. It's going to get used in a fairly aggressive way. So I'm going to beef these up a little bit. These can tend to go crazy on you, particularly after a cap job and, you know, getting the rest of the amp tuned up. These can be a weak link. So I'm going to replace those with a 5 watt. Usually use 500 ohms in there, you know, just for a little extra firmness, you know, because this is going to be required to stay kind of clean. You can see the death cap is still in place. That's this little guy back in here. Okay, that's for the polarity switch. It does have a 3-prong cord already installed. I'm pretty sure it's not the original one because it's gray. But we're going to leave all that in place. It's not doing anybody any harm. May disconnect the death cap. I typically do. Actually, I think I will. But leave it in place. And the polarity switch at this point doesn't do anything. Just leave it in place. It won't hurt anything. A lot of times I'll bypass it. But this guy is so clean that unless there's a good electrical reason for it, I typically won't touch anything. You can see the pride of workmanship at this particular point. 1964 was right where the CBS was, you know, going to be purchasing this. I'm thinking it's early 64 that this amp was manufactured, judging by a lot of the potentiometer codes that I've actually had a chance to look at. But you can see the pride of workmanship here, these tightly wound filament wires, and they're all nice and neat, and all the work is real clean. And I'm sure it sounded great all these years, although I'm not sure how much it's been used, frankly. Somebody took good care of it, and boy, it's clean. You can just about eat a sandwich off the inside of this thing. So it's fun. It's fun to work on this stuff, and like I say, I work on a lot more vintage amps than I actually post on my YouTube channel. A lot of these kind of videos are, you know, if nothing else, they're for me to document the really clean examples that come in, to see what they looked like when they left. You know, sometimes you get you know, I've got Bandmasters in here and you go, God, what was in here originally? And I can't always remember. And it's good to have some documentation to help you out with that. You know, in my line of work, it can be very helpful. But you can see all those carbon comp resistors. It's all original. I'm fairly certain that I'm the first person to open this thing, to be honest with you. Unless that power cord's been replaced. It is a 3-prong cord. And at that particular point in time, I believe they still came with 2-prongers. I need to research that, but it's possible. Oh, now that I'm looking at it, the ground is not connected to that power cord. So that's interesting. Oh, it's a 2-prong cord. Why did I didn't take a close enough look at it. 2-prong cord. All right, that'll be going away. Yep, that'll be going away. We'll be putting a 3-pronger in there. So that could very well be original. It's certainly old enough. Those solder joints look very much like it could be original. But for safety's sake, with modern wiring and modern electricity being what it is, yeah, we're going to replace that thing. So, all right, that's the work for the day. I'm going to have to get these caps replaced. Then I'm going to have to replace those screen grid resistors and a bunch of pots to clean and jacks to tighten and grounding plate to clean and just overall maintenance. Get it ready to get pounded on. Stay tuned. All right, little abject lesson here. Whenever I go through one of these amplifiers that's ancient the way this is, and it's the same age as me. It's 55 years old. So we're going to call that ancient. Whenever I do that, one of the last things I do before I apply power to a circuit is to reach in there to every single one of these wires that's connected. You'll see that one that isn't. Give it a little tug. Just a little gentle tug. Make sure everything's connected. Well, guess what I found right here? Right there. See that guy? You can see where it was, but the solder joint was not enough to hold it in place. And there wasn't enough wire to put it in place either. Thing popped right out of there. And it's been like that for 55 years. So we have to address that. And I'm going to. I have to have the microphone in order for you to hear me. All right, there we go. All fixed. Removed the solder and installed placed all those components in there, and then went ahead and resoldered it. So that should be good. Now, while we've got it at this angle, we can see the bypass cap that I replaced there. Left the resistor in place in that case. It was within spec. These two bypasses here, their accompanying resistors were very far out of spec, more than 30%. So I used some carbon comps in there. The owner has requested that I stay with carbon comps, even though if this were my amp, I would have probably used carbon films in that position, but he wants to retain the carbon comp thing through it. So that's what we're doing. Then, oops, get my meter out of the way here. Then we got this array of bypass down here. Once again, those two 1.5Ks, way out of spec. So I used some new old stock carbon comps in that those two positions there. So yeah, I was able to leave everything else in place. I've tugged on all the wires, so I didn't find any other loose wires. Everything at the front end, potentiometers, jacks, and all that is checked out. Let's see here. Let's go down. Let's get my solder out of the way. And I'm going to move over. And let you see the bias supply board. As you can see, I just did a scorched earth on this thing. I was really worried about those diodes that had the corrosion on both ends here, right up to the housing of each one. And may or may not have been an issue. They didn't necessarily test bad, any of them, but yeah, what the hell. Rectifier diodes are cheap, easily replaced, and yeah, new bias supply there too with the resistor and the diode and capacitor. So all of that stuff has been changed out. I haven't done anything down here at the end with your phase inverter, etc. That stuff I've left alone. Let's look at the power tube sockets. All right, here we are around the other side. Let you have a look at the power tube sockets as promised. Big old 5-watt ceramic screen grid resistors. And actually probably should have shot this from the other side to let you see the swamping resistors. You can kind of see it on this one right up in there, that 1.5K on the underside of that. I changed those out too. They were quite out of spec. They were almost 2.2K instead of the 1.5 they were supposed to be. So anytime a resistor drifts up to the next adjacent value, it's time to go. And again, to my embarrassment, I didn't notice this had a 2-prong cord on it, but it has a 3-pronger now, and you can see how I have it wired here. I've got the ground wire mounted right here to this bolt of the power transformer, and I scrubbed down the area underneath it so I could get a nice firm ground connection with no fear of contradiction there. And then the black and white wire, we've bypassed the courtesy outlet and the switch, the polarity switch for the AC, and left the death cap in place, although it's not in the circuit. We've bypassed all this. The owner wanted me to leave all the wiring in place so that it could be made back to its stock form someday if somebody wanted it to be that way. White wire goes directly over here to the switch, and the other side of that switch is the power transformer. You can see them right here. And then the black wire out of the wall goes straight to the fuse holder right there. And let's see, that's kind of it for everything I've done so far on the inside. I'm hoping no further intensive surgeries will be required, but we won't know till we power it up. Mainly the things I'm doing right now are the things that are faulty and just have to be replaced before we can get to the fine tuning. Let's flip it over and look at the filter cap board. All right, here we are on the mainly positive side of the filter supply board here. We have our 2 main totem poles. These were originally 70 microfarad, and we went up to 100 with these. Here are bridging resistors. Those were formerly carbon comps, and we went with metal oxide because they will last longer and take the pounding necessary. These smaller caps here, which were originally 20 at 525, are now 22 at 500. And yeah, so the filter supply is all finished, and yeah, not much to see on the other side of it. We replaced the bridging resistors, which you can't really see, I don't think. You can kind of see there. You can see that one in there. Those 3-watt blue metal oxides, and there's one down in here too for the main totem pole on that first node of the filter supply. And used F&T caps. I've vacillated back and forth on cap brands. I think I said this before, at various points in my amp repairing life. I've used and been faithful to a couple of different brands. But the F&Ts have really won out in the long run in terms of low failure rates and the right sound. And yeah, so that's what I'm using these days. They're German made, they're very high quality, and I've been real pleased with them. I still use JJs on occasion, and was real happy with those. But honestly, I think the F&Ts sound a little better, particularly in these old Fenders. Could be my imagination. Who knows, really? Sense memories being what they are, and hearing being the worst sense memory. Who knows for sure? But that's my story, and I'm sticking to it, so. I think it's about time to start charging these caps up on the Variac and start seeing what we got here tonally. Stay tuned. All right, well, that's the end of this video, actually. She's all buttoned up. Spent a few hours charging up the electrolytics. Got it sounding good. Real happy with it. It sounds exactly as you would expect. I think I kind of prefer the normal channel over the vibrato channel. It just has more tooth to it. Not really sure why that would be at this point. I'm going to play around with some tubes tomorrow before the owner gets here. There were actually 2 bad preamp tubes. And so there is no V1 or V2 in this amp right now. The owner of the amp is bringing me some tubes tomorrow to try in it, and we'll get it figured out at that point. But it sounds beautiful. Absolutely sounds as good as you would think it would for a 55-year-old amplifier. It's stupendous. No play demo on the end of this. I'm going to do that separately tomorrow because we're right at the very end of a very long day here at the shop. And I just wanted to do the tail end of this bench video here of this 64 Bandmaster. And tomorrow I will shoot a play demo so you can hear what this bad boy sounds like. I kind of prefer keeping the play demos separate. That way, if someone just wants to hear what an amp sounds like, they don't have to go through all of the ins and outs of the repair and the innards. If they're not interested in that, they don't have to try and fast forward to the end of a clip. They can go find the separate clip. So that's all I know for today, folks. The 1964 Fender Bandmaster. She's a honey. I wish I had one, honestly. If you'd like to know anything more about what we do here at Granville Guitars, seek us out on the web at www.granvilleguitars.com, or you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and also the blog over at WordPress, A View from the Granville Bench. That's all I got time for today. Be good to one another.